Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Scouting the Fins. I'm your co-host, Hussam Patel. Joining me today is Eric Smith, Coach Eric Smith, and Eric Wadecki. This show is brought to you by Thompson Cigar. Use the code 3yards20 for 20% off of Thompson Cigar. Premium cigars. I know the folks over at OnlyFins do go ahead and take a look and smoke some of those cigars as well. Let's go ahead and make sure we always use the code 3yards20 for Thompson's Cigar. All right, folks, today's show we'll be talking about a position Miami necessarily has not had trouble with. They've invested deep assets into this as well with draft picks. More recently, Jalen Wright and Devon Achane as well, and free agents in Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. But last year's running game, it took a turn for the worse. It pretty much nosedived from the best running game, the number one running game in the NFL in 2023 to literally the worst 32nd ranked running game in the NFL. Eric, we didn't expect this at first, but could some of these free agents we talk about today actually change the running game narrative?
I think the answer is they can change the running game. Do I think that they can take the Dolphins from where they were this year to what they were in 2023? Probably not. But I do think that the running back position is one in which even a slight tweak, if you put the right guy in, can net you some pretty significant results in terms of the payoff.
I think it does, but Coach, there's something to be said. We know that Raheem Mostert was banged up a little bit last year, and the Dolphins had to rely more of Achane running outside and inside, and also using him as their third pass catcher, wide receiver. Do you still trust Raheem Mostert to get better, or is just that trio of Jalen Wright, Raheem Mostert, and Devon Achane it for this running back room?
I mean, I wouldn't expect Mostert to get better. I think that he could be closer to what he was in 2023 than what he was last year. Like you said, he was playing injured, was not, didn't take care of the ball the way that he typically did. So I don't think that what we got out of Mostert in 2024 was the best version of what's left. But I don't know that we're going to see, the almost 20 touchdowns like we did in 2023 either. Flip side of that is that we should see some growth from both Achane and Wright heading into year 3 and 2 respectively. So if they would go back with the same group, maybe certain parts get better and certain parts regress, but there are opportunities with some of the guys we're going to talk about to improve that room.
From 2023 to 2024, obviously was just a big nosedive. Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane were up there, top 5 running backs in terms of rushing success rate, yards per carry, and rushing yards over expected. Then they pretty much were middle of the pack and league worst in yards per carry. Raheem Mostert had 3.3 yards per carry. He also had less rush yards than Jalen Wright, but he had more rush attempts than Jalen Wright as well. Negative 1.1 rushing yards over expected per attempt, and a negative 0.41 EPA. For reference, Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley had a positive EPA attempt per rush, and we do know that rush EPA is generally more negative than positive. So that's pretty much where we're at this point with this Dolphins running back room. His success rate was less than 30%. He ran the ball inside of the tackles 35% of the time. We know this Dolphins running game is an outside zone type of running game. Devon Achane, he ran inside only 33% of the time, 42.9% success rate, negative 0.4 rushing yards over expected, negative 0.1 EPA, but 4.5 yards per carry. So he was able to net you at least 4 to 5 yards on first down, which is successful enough. It's more so about these third downs. And Eric, we know this third down running game was absolutely abhorrent last year.
Yeah, and just to get back to the conversation about the Raheem Mostert points and the Jeff Wilson points, I guess the reason why some people in the fan base might even think of running back as a larger need, and I tend to almost fall in line with it. I'm approaching the running back room as if there are two guys in it, Devon Achane and Jalen Wright, because in my mind, I don't think that there's a guarantee, especially when you consider the cap situation that they're in, that Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson survive. Not that those guys are making an exorbitant amount of money, but you look at Raheem Mostert and, going into his age 33 season next year, is he really going to be a guy that you want to give $4 or $5 million at the running back spot? I don't know.
Yeah, coach, at the running back position, you want to get younger, not necessarily older. You want younger guys, you want cheap guys, you want fast guys as well. Do you firmly believe Devon Achane is running back 1 next year, or could there be someone we talk about today that could spell Devon Achane or maybe take more so of his snaps if the Dolphins, don't find another pass catcher in free agency or in the draft?
I mean, I think that Achane is running back 1. I think that there are guys that we're going to talk about today that could be closer to a 1B than what we had last year. Obviously, didn't seem like a good formula for success to, put as much of a workload on Achane as what they did last year. So I know that me and plenty of other people would like to see, somebody capable and that the coaching staff trusts to be able to take some of that load off. And, maybe not a 50-50 split, but somebody that can cut into those carries quite a bit and lighten the load on Achane while possibly freeing him up to do some other things in the passing game. But I think Achane is running back 1. It's just how you can preserve him and make him available to do other things as well.
Right. So let's get into the first guy. A lot of Dolphins fans, myself included, wanted to draft Najee Harris with one of their first-round picks back in 2021. Thankfully enough, the Dolphins had drafted Jalen Phillips, who was a stellar pick, albeit his injuries the last 2 years. Najee Harris with the Pittsburgh Steelers last season, 263 attempts, 1,043 yards, 4 yards per carry, negative .09 EPA attempt, but he ran inside the tackles 46.4%. Coach, is he a better inside runner or is he better fit for this Dolphins offense?
I mean, he's a decent combination of both. I mean, it's 6'1", 242. He's obviously, got some momentum behind him when he runs. He reads his own blocking schemes very well. Once he gets going, then he's really a load to bring down. I don't feel like he's not the pile pusher that I expected when watching a back that's as big as he is. If he's not at full speed at that contact, he's not creating that movement and falling forward the way that at least one other guy that we're going to talk about today is. So I was a little disappointed in the power aspect from him, but he has excellent athletic ability, again, for a guy that's 242 pounds. And when you have that kind of weight behind it, get him running downhill and you're going to get some extra yards on contact as well.
Eric, would Najee Harris be useful in this offense with the amount of money his market value would be?
I think he'd be useful in this offense. Would I say that Najee Harris has the best case scenario for this, for the backfield? Probably not. I look at Najee Harris as a guy at 6'1", 240. And ultimately what I think you're looking for at the position right now is I'm looking for a guy late in the ball games that can wear the defense out and then You know, you go 4, 5, 6 carries in a row to a Najee, insert your favorite, big punishing back here, and then you get the defense huffing and puffing. That's when you give Achane the carry. That's when you give him that potential to hit the home run. Najee, as a talent individually, he's a jack of all trades at the running back position, kind of a master of none. Not the most explosive guy in the world, but he is one of the most consistent players you're going to get at the running back position.
Coach, I'm looking at this play right here up against the Cleveland Browns on 3rd and 5, fourth quarter, 2 minutes to go. Okay, Pittsburgh is obviously up by, a touchdown here. It's 14-21. They're trying to ice the game away. But imagine the scenario was 14-14. They're running this play nearby the 50-yard line, and the Dolphins just need a field goal to score right here. This play right here looks more so like an outside zone play, heavy set itself. Can you go ahead and explain what we're watching here and what Najee did right, or if he did anything wrong by any chance?
Yeah, so you're getting a toss, so it's outside zone type stuff there. He's going to be reading the defensive end there, and if we roll that back, look like the tackle and the first tight end probably got that there. So Washington's the outside tight end. So as we see it here, right, you're the guy on the end in the 4-point stance there. That's the guy, the defender in the 4-point stance is the one that Najee's going to be reading, right? He slants to the inside there. So right now, that is an outside read, right? So he is going to press that to the outside. And as you see, right, he's pressing that out as far as he can. When they're running the outside zone stuff, they want to stay on path as long as they can, right? And you see that with Najee here is that, he's staying on path. He's not making an early cut. He's not dancing around. He is receiving that pitch and staying on path as long as he can. And, by pressing that to the outside, the number 9 has to continue to respect that bounce, right? He's got to keep that outside leverage there, which just naturally opens it up. And then Najee can just, make a slight adjustment there to convert.
I gotta say, that is one hell of a block from the F motion, man, right there to get this a successful rush. Again, Eric, the Dolphins' run game is also dependent on how well their skill blockers are. The running backs can only, do so much. Coach, we've watched the Dolphins' running game the last 2 years. We've seen the difference. If the Dolphins' skill players block like they did last year, do you think it's worth paying Najee Harris almost his contract expectation for next year is almost $9 million per year average? Do you think it's worth it?
No, I don't. It's the same as the other stuff we talked about. We've talked about the guards. That if the guard's the only thing you fix, it doesn't make a difference. And it's the same idea here. That if all you do is to, upgrade the running back position, but you don't fix those perimeter blockers, you don't fix the guards, you're going to have a lot of the same results as you do now. So, this isn't a team that's one player away. If they decide that Najee Harris is worth the 9 or 10 million a year that he's projected at, you can't just make that move and expect that to, be the difference in your run game. You have to do it as part of a packaged approach.
Eric?
Yeah, I wouldn't go that expensive with Najee Harris because of part of the things that you mentioned, with how dependent the Dolphins run game is on some of those guys on the perimeter. I do wonder about Najee Harris being able to kind of create those extra yards for himself when the blocks aren't super advantageous. So probably not the best fit in the world for me.
All right, the next person we'll talk about is A.J. Dillon. Now, folks, we know how Chris Grier likes his players. He likes his players tenured vets. He likes his players often injured, and he likes to pay them a lot of money. Obviously, this is a running joke, but AJ Dillon did have a stinger, and he was out for the season for a neck injury. Big bruise in back that theoretically should help the Dolphins in short yardage situations. You talked about it, Eric. You want a guy that can get 3-4 rush attempts, that can get, move the chains, a first down here, first down there. Then you spell him with Achane, and Achane hits the home run. When I take a look at AJ Dillon's 2023 numbers, rushing yards over expected negative -0.4, 178 carries for 613 yards. That's not good yards per carry right there, even specifically on first down. He wasn't necessarily the first down back. Aaron Jones was. But, Coach, when you watch A.J. Dillon, is this someone that fits the scheme?
I mean, I guess it depends on what the scheme is. I mean, there's a lot of talk about, people want the Dolphins to go to more of an inside zone type scheme, and he could fit that type of thing. That type of scheme. He's a between the tackles thumper. Like, he's going to make a quick decision. He's going to put his head down. He's got those massive thighs that are going to, attempt to drive the pile. The problem with Dillon is that you do lose that, a lot of that outside zone stuff. He doesn't have the speed to turn the corner. So it's, kind of a almost too far of a 180, in my opinion, from, the scheme that they have said they want to run. For me, if you go from Achane to Dillon on the field, then it becomes almost a little too predictable as far as, the run game menu that's available with Dillon. And it's probably going to be, not the stuff that you're the best at. So, if we're talking about just a couple plays a game, we want a short yardage, move the pile guy, then yeah, Dillon is a good fit for that. But I don't know that you can spend a roster spot on a guy that's that far away from, what you do every other down.
So if we think about it, Eric, he's Jeff Wilson, but he's not Jeff Wilson, right? To put it into contextual terms, Jeff Wilson wasn't used much the last 2 years, but when he was on the field, you kind of knew what was going to happen. Like, they're going to run it in between the tackles. For A.J. Dillon in 2023, 65.2% of his runs went inside the tackles. He faced a stack box 25.5% of the time. And if you're there on 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, chances are you might see a stacked box, but then for the Dolphins, there's a threat of the pass to Devon Achane, to Jonnu Smith. So you're thinking, maybe if I get, A.J. Dillon, if he could be like a decoy type of person, I could throw the ball over the middle, or I could throw the ball pretty deep, and I could potentially use him as like a decoy.
Yeah, and that's where I think the value in Dillon probably lies the most, is in a couple of facets here. Number one, I think he does kind of do a lot of the things Jeff Wilson does, just a little bit better. Obviously, the film in the last year and a half or so isn't great on Dillon, but I do think that he's an interesting buy low candidate, and potentially a guy that can return to the form that he had in 2021 or 2022. But really, I think with A.J. Dillon, you're looking at a guy that's a really good pass protector at the running back position as well, which is a huge plus for the Dolphins, considering that they have a quarterback like Tua Tagovailoa, who we really don't want to see get hit. So, I mean, and considering the cost, the fact that he was injured and is coming off a little bit of a down year, I don't think he's going to be much more than the veteran minimum at the running back spot. And if that's the going rate, I think that the upside with Dillon is high enough to justify if he's going to be, your third or maybe even fourth guy in the running back room. And also playing in a Matt LaFleur system kind of helps, certainly.
Yeah, Coach, my next question was, he played with the Packers for the last couple of years inside that outside zone variant of scheme. How can he not be a decent enough system fit?
Well, I mean, because I think that when you look at what the Dolphins do, I think that, unless they are making that change, unless they are moving those bigger guards with the, more of the inside zone stuff, the Dolphins are more outside zone focused than some of these other teams, more perimeter stuff. Like I said, it's not to say that he can't. I mean, he reads blocks well. It's just that, in my opinion, when you talk about being able to attack the entire field, which seems to be something the Dolphins want to do from a, play in and play out basis, and you put Dillon back there, then just in my opinion, it feels like it reduces the areas that you can attack in the running game.
Right. If we take a look at the Dolphins run concept percentages, this is something I pulled off of FTN database. 29% of their rush concepts were outside zone, and 21% of their inside zone, and they had 27% of their rush concepts were inside zones between the tackles. And we do know that the Dolphins, they were trying to run between the tackles. They were trying to run up the middle around 32% of the time as well. And we saw that they were failing at that. If they want to continue, that same scheme, same type of running style as last season, I feel like A.J. Dillon is the fit. Coach and Eric, this is one outside tackle run that A.J. Dillon got for no gain. But, Coach, why don't you go ahead and break this down for us and see what your thoughts are up against this stout Rams defensive line from 2023. So it looks like they're in the high red zone area, single back 12 personnel.
Yeah, so I mean, it looks like it's obviously a inside run, probably an inside zone type thing there. Didn't get the vertical movement at the point of attack there, and we'll see in the end zone angle here. Right, so probably going to have combo block between the center or the right guard and right tackle there, and based on the leverage there, that should be hitting right up in there in the C gap between the tackle and the tight end, but there's just not the space there, so you see Dillon bouncing that. So this wasn't a designed run to the outside. This was him bouncing because there just wasn't a hole there for him.
All right. Eric, your final thoughts on A.J. Dillon.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's heavily dependent on the price. But I think A.J. Dillon could kind of re-add some of that element as an inside runner that they were missing in 2024, because when you look at the difference in 23 and 24, obviously that's not to say that the blocking was the same. It wasn't. But I think Raheem Mostert's regression, whether that's due to injury, could have been due to injury, or age or what have you, was probably, I think, the biggest factor in the run game doing as poorly as it did last season.
Well, we do know that the Dolphins need to get a bit younger, a bit faster, a bit cheaper as well if they ever want to get over to the big game. And speaking of the big game, the best app for your big game party is actually on your phone, and it's called Underdog. Underdog is the best place to cash in on all your takes during the playoffs. Which players are going off and which ones are ice cold? Make your entries in just a few taps. With their pick'em game, you could win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on players' stats, such as yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and more. Underdog is the only pick'em platform that puts the power to cash out in your hands. Now you can either keep riding with your entry or tap the Win Now button to cash out whenever you want. Every dog deserves a second chance. And with Underdog Rescues, you can get your money back and receive a promo if an early injury causes your entry to lose. Underdog is the best place to play pick'em. Download the Underdog app today and use promo code 3yards to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Higher or lower, you make the call on Underdog.
Must be 18 plus, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 19 plus in Alabama, New England, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE NY or text Hope NY to 467-369. Must be.
All right. The next rusher we're going to be talking about almost went to the big game if, the people wearing the zebras actually took a look and see where the ball was spotted for Josh Allen. But instead, we'll be seeing Patrick Mahomes for the third straight year in the big game. I'm talking about Buffalo Bills running back Ty Johnson. 41 carries for 213 yards, 5.2 yards per carry, 53.7% success rate. You're telling me half the time he is able to get yards that is good enough to reach a first down. So when I'm talking about success rate, Coach and Eric, I'm talking about on first down, they're able to gain 5 or more yards on first down. On second down, they're able to get up to 75% of the yards. 55% of the yards to a first down. And on third down, they have to get 100% of the yards on first down. So if you want someone to spell out chain, someone that can get you those yards on third and short, I think Ty Johnson might be your guy. He ran inside the tackles 34% of the time. Coach, you were making some you're making some looks right there. I see you smiling. Do you have some good words for Ty Johnson, or do you think differently?
A little of both. I felt that Ty Johnson was the hardest eval out of the group that we have here. A lot of my stuff, watching the film on them, did focus on the short yardage stuff, and Ty Johnson had the best offensive line in short yardage runs. So, that makes things a lot easier, right? When you're running into a hole that's 3 yards wide, right, it makes a lot bigger difference than what we just looked at with A.J. Dillon, where you can't even, put a piece of paper between the tackle and the tight end. But that's not so much a knock on Ty Johnson. He read those blocks well. He got where he needed to be. He hit those holes decisively. When there was contact, even though he's not a big guy, 5'10", 210 pounds, I thought he did a good job of getting his pads low and, making a small target for the defense to hit. He's not going to be the pile pushing type, not going to, hit a linebacker in the hole and, get stood up and drive for the extra yards there. I do think that he's, probably a little better short yardage runner than what HN is. I think he's probably closer to what we saw out of the good version of Mostert. The concern with him is obviously, he's been in the league since 2019 and his, highest yardage is 273 yards. And he's been with 3 different teams. I mean, Detroit, the Jets, and the Bills, right? So, what's going on with him that he can't stick and he can't seem to get a ton of opportunities? But there is intrigue there.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think Ty Johnson has an interesting skill set. I also think that play there is a very good example of the benefit of playing with Josh Allen as a running back, because you saw at that mesh point, the defenders were all watching number 17. Not to say that Ty Johnson is, solely a product of that, but he's always been a complementary piece. And I'm looking for a running back in the room that can help me turn Devon Achane into less of a running back and more of an overall offensive weapon. And we look at this play here versus the Chiefs.
He's able to gash through the hole.
That's a really good job of getting skinny right in that hole. That's not a very big hole for Ty Johnson to go through. But I like the burst and I like the balance that he runs with. And he's also a very good pass catcher, as we know. But again, I do think maybe a little bit of it is redundant to what Devon Achane brings you on offense, and I think you might be looking for something maybe a little bit different.
Coach, do you agree that he has the same skill set as Devon Achane?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very similar. I mean, if we sat here and we talked about Achan, especially the 2023 version of Achan, we'd be talking about a guy that has, good balance, good contact balance, reads holes well, gets through the hole quickly, gets skinny, right? That sounds really familiar with what we just talked about. So you'd be saying a lot of the same type of things. I mean, they're a little bit different, Achan is a little more explosive in the open field than what Johnson is, where I feel that, Johnson, probably has a little more ability in the short yardage stuff. So they're a little bit different, but there is a lot of overlap between the two of them.
It does intrigue you that he's bounced around a couple of teams, but for the money that he's worth, is it worth a roster spot?
Worth a roster spot, yes. But is it worth saying that Achan is running back 1 and this is our running back 2 regardless, without adding something else to the room? Or maybe it is. Like, maybe you kind of go with a low end investment here in Ty Johnson, and you put it between Ty Johnson and Jalen Wright to compete for those number 2 carries. Like that is certainly a world that we could live in, where they're adding pieces to that room, but it's not necessarily the 1B type that we're talking about.
Now, his average market value, if he were to get another contract, would probably be $2.5 to $2.7 million a year, which isn't a lot. And Eric mentioned it, that between Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert, they're making around $3.1 million a year. And Jalen Wright is on a rookie deal. In terms of money and finances, that makes sense. But, Coach, you did say it. It really is dependent on the offensive line if the Dolphins are able to make valuable investments in there. The key metric that I'm looking at between Devon Achane and Ty Johnson is that obviously Achane had way more attempts, but he was under center 40% of the time with the Dolphins, which includes single back formation and pistol formation looks as well. With Ty Johnson, he was under center almost 66% of the time, able to get 5.2 yards per carry, and face stacked boxes 36% of the time, compared to 20% for Devon Achane. What these numbers tells me is that I feel like the Dolphins need to have a traditional type of running game and not really rely on the gimmicks and the motions and the sweeps that they have ran in the past. Eric, it seems like you agree with me.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And the thing about Ty Johnson as well is, for a guy that has bounced around the league, I think he kind of settled into a really solid role with Buffalo this past season, and I'd be kind of surprised to see him leave a situation like that, considering that this is the first time that he's really had a consistent kind of role. But I agree. I think you're looking at a situation where you need more of that traditional running game, because, like I said, I think to call Devon Achane solely a running back is to devalue his value as an offensive player. And I think you need a guy that frees him up to be more of that versatile weapon that we know he can be.
Coach, do the Dolphins need to run under center more, or should they look to run more so from the gun and pistol formation?
I think you can do it either way. They're in the book, what the heck was it? The Why is Everything. There was a good piece in there about how, the Kyle Shanahan, the Mike McDaniel brain trust, in this system realize that you could run everything out of a gun formation that you can from under center. You know, it changes some of the stuff in terms of the deception, right? You can hide the ball better when you're under center and you're faking the outside zone stuff because your body is covering the ball up more than you are out of a gun or a pistol. So when you're talking about the boot action, but you know that's the type of thing that you're not going to see Tua booting outside and being a threat to run the ball. So for the Dolphins' perspective, you know, I don't know that you gain a ton from moving him under center and turning his back to the defense versus staying in a gun and, you know, letting him be able to see that defense more since he's not going to be threatening the edge of a defense.
All right, just a thought, because it seems to me, and I don't have the statistic pulled up with me, but the Dolphins ran a lot on first downs, much more normally than they should. And I feel like that they have to throw the ball a little bit more on first down to lessen their yards they need to get on second and third down. So it seems to me that I think they should pass the ball more on first down. And league-wide, more teams are passing the ball on first down. I do think that's probably why we're seeing a lot of too high looks and shell looks. So maybe, you know, everyone is zigging and Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins are zagging. Maybe it might not have paid off last season. Maybe it might pay off next season. Eric, you disagree.
I don't think it'll pay off next season because I think that in a situation where you're playing against that deep shell or the too high shell there, and the defense is kind of giving you those short passes, you know, over between anywhere from the line of scrimmage to 5 yards, you can use that first down pass play as like one of those solid 4 or 5 yard runs that sets you up on 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4, where you hit Jonnu Smith over the middle on just a 5 yard curl. That's what I would want to do with the passing game on first downs, especially considering that the way the defenses are playing you is kind of put yourself in those advantageous positions. And I think that that's something that eventually they'll come around to if defenses continue to play them the same way.
And, you know, that's where I feel like the benefit of running under center a little bit more is there, because you have the deception outlook, even in the passing game. The next running back I'm about to talk about is a San Francisco 49er. He was also injured in 2024. Elijah Mitchell. He doesn't even have 1,000 yards in his career, but take a look at this. In 2023, he ran inside 29.3% of the time, which is normal for this Shanahan outside zone type of scheme. Faced stacked boxes 48% of the time, but he ran under center almost 70% of the time. And if we know anything about the San Francisco 49ers in 2023, decent-ish enough offensive line. They weren't world beaters by any chance. UFA seventh round rookie in Brock Purdy, who may be potentially getting a good enough deal soon. But they made a deep run into the playoffs, man. But Elijah Mitchell only 75 carries for less than 300 yards. That sounds like a guy that can spell Devon Achane, or can potentially be that 1B, 1C, where Jalen Wright also gets a little bit of more snaps. Coach, what are your thoughts on Mitchell?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about a 3-back rotation with Jalen Wright, then I could see somebody like Elijah Mitchell. You know, the note that I have on him, you know, says Walmart Achane, right? Like, you know, he does a lot of the same things. You know, I don't think that he has near the same, you know, change of direction or elusiveness as Achane, but, you know, we're talking about a guy that's not very big at, you know, 5'10", 200 pounds. You know, he reads the blocks well. He's decisive, but, you know, he's not going to be not the pile pusher, not going to break a bunch of tackles. He's going to be your, you know, when you think of the typical, you know, Shanahan running back dating back to the 90s, like, you know, this is the type of guy that they draft late and they teach him to read the blocks, and he just does exactly what the blocks say, and he's not going to be real creative with it. So, if you're looking at somebody to, like I said, is the three-headed monster type deal with Achane, Wright, and somebody else, then that would be a role that I could accept for Mitchell. Getting him and expecting more out of it, especially considering his injury history, then I think would be a downgrade. But as a third option, I'd be open to that.
Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree overall. I think with Mitchell, it is a lot of overlap, as you are going to see with guys that play in the Shanahan system. There's a reason why they have a type. It's worked for 30 plus years. But with Elijah Mitchell, I think you're looking at a guy that the thing that we have to keep in mind when we're looking at these San Francisco running backs is, firstly, you want to talk about guard play and that being a sore spot for the Dolphins. The 49ers guard play was not very good this season. But you look at what they have at their skill positions with Brandon Ayuk, with George Kittle, with Kyle Juszczyk. They are as good as Alec Ingold is, and as nice as Julian Hill and Durham Smythe can be 1 out of every 3 plays. They do not have the skill position blocking that the San Francisco 49ers do. And that's where I think Devon Achane getting to be as good as he was last year was almost a small miracle and a testament to how good he is as an individual player. It was not a good situation to be a running back in Miami last year.
No, it wasn't. But I'm curious to see if Jalen Wright gets an increase of snaps. And look, folks, we're talking about the running backs in this free agency because we believe that Raheem Mostert may not go back to his form that we saw in 2023. We saw his regression last year. And if history tells us anything, you want to move a player off a year earlier rather than a year too late, financially, asset-wise, and also, scheme-wise as well. So I personally feel like the Dolphins may cut Raheem Mostert based off of his play last season. Don't get me wrong. He's a great locker room guy. He's a leader, and he's a dog. But based off of his season last year, I don't think they bring him back. Coach Eric, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And I hate to make the last 43 minutes here sound trivial, but ultimately, if I were the one at the controls, if I were Chris Greer, running back would not be a position that I would really look twice at in free agency. And it's not necessarily because this crop is really bad, but it's because I think you have what could be a historic running back class in the draft this year, and you can get a guy that's probably better than 80% of the backs available on the open market, even into day 2, day 3. So I just, that's where my focus would be if we're looking to upgrade the running back room. But I wholly agree. I don't think Raheem Mostert is on the roster next season.
I agree. I don't think he's safe. I'm not ready to say that he's not going to be on the roster. The thing with a contract like Mostert is that, this isn't a player that they have to cut right away. Like, this isn't a massive cap savings. It's going to change what they can do in free agency. So there's not any reason they can't stick with Mostert for now. It's not a position that it's not the guard position. Like, we're not going in and saying that there's no way we can run it back with these same guys. And none of us know how much injury affected Mostert versus the drop-off. The coaching staff and the training staff, those are the only ones that are going to know that. But I could certainly see a scenario where, we go through free agency, maybe they, add an Elijah Mitchell or something like that, a near veteran minimum contract. You get into the draft, and like Eric said, there's a lot of good options in here. Travion Henderson is I would love to see him with the Dolphins, right? So if you go out and he slips and the Dolphins can get somebody like that or one of the other guys, then I could see a scenario where, you know, maybe post draft they, kind of do a courtesy to Mostert by cutting him at that point and letting him go versus having him waited out through training camp and then being a late release. But I don't, like I said, I don't think it's season's not over if we don't change the running back room, but I think there are opportunities to do it. And I, would not be willing to make a bet on Mostert being on the roster in 2025.
Yeah, but there are a lot of good players in this draft. Namely, you mentioned Travion Henderson. A guy I'm looking at is Damian Martinez from Miami. Potentially Caleb Johnson from Iowa as well. I mean, that guy is a big guy. He's a bruiser. He can catch the ball out of the backfield as well. There was a player that is hitting this season's free agent running back class who the Dolphins desperately wanted, and that's Denver running back Javonte Williams. The Broncos actually overlapped the Dolphins to go grab Javonte Williams, and he was a lot of Dolphins fans' draft crush. Last season, 139 rushing attempts, 513 yards, 3.7 yards per carry. He ran in between the tackles 65.5% of the time. That Broncos offensive line was big. They were mean, but they were not impressive in the run game. What impresses me most about Javonte Williams is that even though he is just a tad bit under 6 foot, he is a little bit of a bruiser. He can catch the ball out of the backfield, and he gives you that 1A, 1B option. And he was under center 66% of the time last season. And if anything, Sean Payton's scheme is a West Coast type of scheme, similar to the Shanahan outside zone, but not fully like it itself.
Yeah, and historically, Javonte Williams this year was coming off of a major injury, and historically, it's really that second season when you start to see guys get back to form. So when you look at what the cost might be in free agency as opposed to the reward, and I do think that the ceiling with Javonte Williams is still there. I think he's a guy maybe similar in the mold to a J.K. Dobbins that we saw sign for a cheap deal in L.A. and went on to have a very good year. I think he could be that kind of player if the Dolphins were to go that route in free agency. I just really like Javonte Williams as a total package. Just solid blocker, pretty good receiver out of the backfield. And I think he's a guy that runs really hard.
Yep. Coach, we're seeing this play right here. Third and 2, 3rd and 1. It's a crack toss play, which the Dolphins absolutely love to run. Good enough blocking, and he's able to get 4 yards on 3rd down. Is it worth paying him almost $6.9 to $7.2 million a year?
Yeah. In my opinion, yes. Javonte Williams is my favorite running back in the free agent class. I actually watched Williams right after I watched Najee Harris, and the first thing that I noticed was that Harris had much better blocking than what Williams did, like you alluded to there. I was kind of surprised to see that Williams has not had a 1,000-yard season yet, but you could see with that first clip you show that he does have the speeds to still threaten the edge that I don't feel that a guy like A.J. Dillon has. We talked about Najee Harris being a big back, but not necessarily a thumper, a pile driver. And Javonte Williams, while he's shorter at 5'10" and being 220, it's still a similar density to what Harris has. He's still a big back. Reads blocks well, the same as some of the other guys. But, this is the guy for me that, could really be a 1B to H-N. And he's the type of guy that, if you get into a game and, Williams is your hot hand, then this is a guy that could, dominate the carries while Achane can still contribute in other ways. So yeah, for me, if you're talking about Harris, like you said, he was around a 10 million projection and Williams at a 6 or 7. I'm taking Williams all day on that. And even some of the other, some of the cheaper guys that we talked about, there's a lot more questions around that. Whereas Williams is the one that I am most confident in. being able to come in and be an every down back, especially, God forbid something happens to Achane, you get a back like Javonte Williams in there, and it's not just a death sentence for the running game. Can still be productive, and like I said about the blocking scheme, or the blocking ability with those Broncos, he did not get a lot of help from that offensive line. So if we can make the improvements in the offensive line and we bring in a Javonte Williams who hasn't had that benefit, it could really be a big signing if they would go that direction.
It will be. It's going to depend on the numbers if the Dolphins are going to go after him. I will say his agency is with Clutch Sports with Nicole Lynn, and his agent is actually Demarius Bilbo. If Dolphins fans can recall, Demarius Bilbo was the agent for Jarvis Landry, who tore apart this Dolphins management and the team back then, and thus Landry was not able to resign. So maybe the love is lost. Maybe the relationship has gotten better. But considering Williams coming off of an injury the year prior, hasn't hit 1,000 yards as well, and the film is there where you can evaluate it, maybe his number goes down a little bit less where he's making more than his rookie contract, but it's around $5.5 million a year. I think if they were to move off of Raheem Mostert, I think Javonte Williams would be better. He's younger. He won't necessarily be cheaper, but the investment is there if, God forbid, Devon Achane is out for a while with some injury and Jalen Wright tries to step up into his position, and you're left with just Jalen Wright and maybe a Jeff Wilson or a UDFA guy or another rookie. All right, folks, thank you guys so much for sticking with us here on Scouting Defense. Make sure you guys are subscribed to OnlyFins on Discord. That's Discord.onlyfins/GG. I'm sorry, I had that wrong. Oh, it's the other way. It's the other way around. $4.99 a month for the premium vetted version, where you guys are able to listen to our premium stage shows, where we do much, much more in-depth film analysis, and you get exclusive news and content from the 3 yards per carry crew along with us. Stick with us, folks. As always, go Fins.